Ashley to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming to chat with us.
Thank you so much.
I always start, so I'll ask you first of all. This is what I ask all of my guests. Are you well, actually?
I love that question. Yes, I feel like I'm doing better. Last year, 2022 was like one of the hardest years of my life. So I can't say that I was well a lot during that year. But I can feel a sea change. So I think I'm really ready to do some of the inner work that I need to do, just tightening up, lifestyle, diet, exercise, and feeling a lot of the groundwork that we laid last year hopefully starting to come to fruition. So on some levels, which I think is probably common for many people, on some levels I'm amazing and things are just cruising and awesome, and then on other levels there's things that are extraordinarily challenging. And um yeah, so I feel like that's the balancing act of life and just taking it all in stride.
Yeah. And you said compared to last year, you feel like you feel that sea change. Do you think that's circumstantial, or would you say you've relied on, say, one or two things you've done, like self practices, inner work, whatever it might be, that have really
Yeah, honestly, I think the biggest tool that I'm using right now is compassion and self-compassion, a lot of self-compassion. Last year threw me a couple curveballs, primarily in my business, and things just sort of turned upside down. Really impacted my income unexpectedly, things that were pretty much beyond our control. So it just was, it made things really stressful and tight. And it was basically all I could do to just get by and keep trying to lead and be a visionary amidst an enormous amount of stress. And it was very humbling, but I think, the thing that really kept me going was just so much compassion. And, this is the way of life. And things change. So many things are beyond our control. And really it's not about what you're doing, it's about how you're doing what you're doing. So I just tried to show up every day with as much steadiness and calm and um as I could. But it was very, very difficult and just so humbling. So I think the self-compassion, and then the more tangible sort of lifestyle tool is just that, really making a priority to take care of my health and vitality. So sleep, diet, or should say nutrition, exercise, meditation, which have not been the most consistent things, but um, yeah, those are so important. And I've also been in a big change because I have a 2-year-old, and so I just have been going through a really big shift in identity and of course lifestyle, and sort of just beginning to come out of that intense newborn phase where you're really sleep deprived. I'm just beginning to come out of that. So yeah, it's been intense, but those are the few things.
she's the cutest. I think you shared a video a while ago of her singing, and it was just like the most incredible. I don't know what she was singing along to, but she was like so in it.
She
Um,
loves singing.
yeah,
It's the sweetest thing. Yeah, she loves singing.
that's
Mhm.
so nice. Does she get that from you?
I don't know. I see a lot of my spirit in her. Like she has a real spark that I think I also have, and sort of just of extreme joyfulness. And I mean, a lot of kids have that. But yeah, no, she's really attuned to singing and speaking and vocabulary, and that's one of her superpowers, I can tell for sure.
Amazing. Yeah, I think because because you're a teacher, so that kind of ability to communicate and I guess transmit knowledge and wisdom. I wanted to ask you a little bit actually about your kind of your journey or journeys. I guess it's all connected anyway, but from your background in psychology to being in yoga to coaching people, what came first actually? Was it the psychology stuff or was it the yoga?
Yoga came first. So right after I probably thought at some point about majoring in psychology. I mean, I think I've always been, interested in humanities and life experience, but right when I graduated from college, I went to USC here in Los Angeles, and right away, the first 3 to 6 months, I met Govindas, who now owns Bhakti Yogashala in LA, and he became one of my dearest friends and soul brothers, and we neither one of us were doing anything yoga. Obviously, at the time, we were both acting and running around Hollywood, and um, anyway, but he was really into yoga, and I was always really athletic and spiritual, and so he introduced me to yoga. Although earlier, when I was like 12 years old, I did have the instinct. My whole family was in Hawaii on a vacation, and I remember checking in, and they said, "Oh, there's a yoga class in the morning." Like this was back in the 80s, you know. "Oh, there's a yoga class in the morning," you know. And I don't know that any of us had ever heard of yoga, and I was like, "We have to all go. We have to all go." So I like drug my whole family to this yoga class way, way, way back. But then I found yoga through Govindas, and it really changed my life. I started practicing pretty consistently right away. And then shortly after that, a couple of years, knew that I wanted to start teaching, started teaching in 2000, and was just really curious and inspired with how the practice had completely was healing a lot of core wounds that I had.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I could see shifts in my, well, first of all, physically, but also in my psyche, in my personality traits. You know, there were really tangible shifts happening. And I was just really curious about what was going on. You know, I was just going to this hour-and-a-half long vinyasa yoga practice. How was this happening? Govindas also introduced me to Ram Dass and Krishna Das. So I was already listening to Ram Dass, who of course was a psychologist at Harvard, and then found yoga. So I was being educated in it. And then once I had been teaching for several years, I realized I really wanted to help people on another level. I wanted to help them, you know, quote, take their yoga off the mat and have some really tangible tools. And I also am insatiably curious. And so I just wanted to understand, how are these overlapping Western psychology, Eastern yoga? What are they? How can they serve each other? Where are the holes, if any, in both of them? And that's what I ended up writing my master's thesis on, and the integration of yoga and psychology. And then became licensed. You know, went through my whole internship, traineeship, became licensed. Very long process.
Yes.
And yeah,
I have some
yeah.
friends who have done that, and yeah, it's many, many years.
It's many years. I can't even believe I did it because I'm my own constitution. I'm really not much of a rule follower. So it was like it took everything I had to
Yeah.
get through those board exams. But it was amazing. And I see why you have to do it and why it's so hard, because it's good.
And what
Yeah, so that yoga came first, and then the psychology, and now just building my trainings and really training both teachers and students to integrate and find that you know, the different tools that are helpful from both. And yeah, and I love coaching teachers. I love coaching mental health professionals. Layperson, we just started the membership, so now we're back to live streaming classes multiple times a week, which is amazing and
Mhm.
really exciting.
Yeah. And then, even if it was a lengthy process to go through the psychology training, what you've created as a result is so amazing. Um, like that because I found you actually through Mia. I think you guys did like an interview. It was during lockdown, and then I found I think it's the Foundation for Yoga Psychology, and and um and it was just so fascinating to me how you were drawing the parallels between the two. And I don't know if I'm right about this, but did Carl Jung take a lot from Eastern mysticism, from yoga?
Definitely, absolutely. He actually did go to India and study. There's a great book called Kundalini Yoga. It's Kundalini Yoga, something psychology of Kundalini Yoga, maybe. Really about the Kundalini and the way consciousness moves through the body. That was written by Jung, and several other. I guess I should say he has a lot of papers that he wrote on that, and then they might have been compiled into a book. But there was another woman who wrote a real in-depth book on his study of yoga, and not only yoga but archetypal psychology, many different practices, meditation, like, and he really was interested, I think, in, well, the archetypes of Hinduism and how yoga looked at consciousness. And the chakras. He has a whole paper on the chakras, which is really fascinating. So yeah, he
Yeah.
definitely was very influenced.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And yeah, just so I just feel like, and I think you also once said something about even I think you said CBT was reminiscent of one of the Yoga Sutras. Am I right in remembering
Mm.
that?
There is a sutra. So I perhaps let me try this get this right. Well, there's a lot of overlap with mindfulness and some meditation practices and cognitive behavioral therapy for sure. And cognitive behavioral therapy, which I'm not an expert in by any means, but is really tangible ways of sort of interrupting the pattern, the thought pattern that you're having. And so it might be, oh, it's I'm not going to remember the Sanskrit right off the top of my head, but essentially the sutra is saying future suffering can be, mitigated, can be stopped by present moment action. And so it's the idea that even the thoughts that we're thinking, of course, the actions we're taking are creating our future suffering, could be creating our future suffering or non-suffering. And so is that thought, and so there's several, in my yoga psyche soul training in the relationship module, we have a tool that we use in relationships for called a thought monitoring exercise,
Hmm.
where you're in witness mind, and so you're just observing your thought.
Hmm.
And when you notice you're having suffering, you're having an uncomfortable experience, emotion, you pause, interrupt that, and ask yourself, is this thought giving me the result that I want? Right. So if you're having suffering, probably not. And so then you can banish that thought. You can, some people will say cancel, clear, delete. I like the word banish. It's kind of, proactive and firm. Um, and then you replace it, right? So you learn how to replace your thought and notice that every thought that you're thinking isn't true. And
Hmm.
just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's true. And then also that you don't have to buy into that thought. You don't have to continue thinking that thought, add on more story and more thoughts about that. So that's part of how there's an overlap. It's one simple example of how there's some overlap with cognitive behavioral therapy. But there is that sutra, um, that future suffering is depending on your current action. And so
Yeah.
it's really taking that ownership of your mind and realizing how important it is to begin to master your mind.
Yeah. And I guess you said when you had a challenging year last year, all of that stuff must have really come into play. Um,
Yeah, it was, I think anytime we experience really intense moments in life, for me, my fertility journey was incredibly painful and challenging, and waiting many, many, many years to finally find my partner and finally, luckily, have a baby. So anything, whatever it is, watching my father go through his cancer journey and pass away, last year, financial, career sort of upside down. Um, Anytime we have those experiences of challenge, they are calling all of our practices to the fore. We have to, it's really where the rubber meets the road. So how am I going to show up? What are the actions I'm going to take? By the way, it was not easy. I really was experiencing some pretty significant depression and anxiety last year. I also noticed some really unhealthy patterns that I had of maybe isolating, having shame, not wanting to reach out to my friends for enough support, internalizing a lot of things.
mhm.
So I see how for many of us, those are natural tendencies. And it really takes a lot of initiative to break out of that, and forge, more healthy pathways, taking healthier actions. And yeah, I think that anytime, again, we're in that obstacle, it's where we really get to practice what we've, I look at every time we sit on our meditation cushion, every time we get on the yoga mat, you're making a deposit in your future self. You're investing in your future self. You're building those muscles, strengthening, whether it's self acceptance, forgiveness, compassion, patience, mindfulness, all of these tools that are incredibly helpful we're making that deposit. We're becoming more skillful at those. And we may not realize it at the time, but then down the line, when we are in those challenging experiences, that's where we get to see, what we're made of and put those tools into practice. So that's why our mundane sort of daily practice is so important.
And what does your daily practice look like at the moment?
It definitely shifts. It's certainly shifted since I had a baby. I mean, the truth of it is, I am not a really strong personal yoga practitioner. Like, I have never had like a great home practice. It's just not my thing. I really like to practice with people. I like to be guided by a teacher.
Mm.
Um, so I very rarely self-initiated roll out the mat and do it myself on my own. I would much rather, I'm in my dear friend Sean Corn's membership. I'll go do some of her classes. I mean, I'm kind of subscribed to pretty much all, yoga, Yoga Glow and Yoga International. I mean, I have all these memberships. And what I really like to do in an ideal world is I'm going to bed at 9 o'clock and then I'm waking up at 5 so I can actually sit and meditate. That I love to do. Still don't do it that often or every day, but ideally I'm sitting to meditate. I always do a shot karma practice in the morning. That is one thing I do.
Can you
Jalanetti, tongue
can you
scraping.
briefly
Yeah.
explain the Shat Karma, just because some people might not
Yeah.
know? Mm.
Yeah. So shot karma is a part of the yogic practice, more of an Ayurvedic approach. It's the understanding that, our body is a vehicle for consciousness, and there are natural things that we need to do to, maintain, health and vitality in our body. Of course, nutrition and exercise, but there are also cleansing practices that are pretty simple, pretty basic, that we can do, particularly in the morning, that help us to just clear out everything that's accumulated overnight. So simple philosophy is, obviously we know overnight our body is detoxifying. It's what sleep does. It's the rest and repair function of the body. But it's also when we process a lot of toxins, food, emotions, even in our dream state. So in the physical body, what that can look like is an accumulation of ama. In Ayurveda, that's what it's called, AMA. Ama is excess energy that builds up. It can be from emotion, it can be from food. So particularly we notice it physically as the mucus layer in the body. So film on the tongue, on the eyes, in the nasal passages, also bile in the digestive tract. So one of the things that we want to do is clear all that out. First thing in the morning is to clear out that layer. So we're just starting nice and fresh. So one of the, some simple practices, starting your day with room temperature water and a glass of water and lemon, that's going to clear out your digestive tract and just neutralize everything, get your digestive system going. Um, Cupping your hands, there's a film that accumulates on the eyes. So cupping your palms in water, it's called eye washing. I don't know how anyone doesn't do it. I do that, religiously.
I do.
And you just flutter your eyelid, and it washes off that film on both eyes. And then Jala Neti is salt water through the nose. So those three things, I definitely do religiously. Like, I can't even go into my day without doing Jala Neti or eye washing.
Mm-hmm.
Tongue scraping is a third one. Skin brushing, of course, is really good. More advanced practices are the actual nollie, in moving the digestive organs around. But if you just do skin brushing, eye washing, Jala Neti, and the lemon water, you're going to be really good to go.
Yeah, I've done tongue scraping for like 10 years or so.
Yeah,
I just couldn't not do it now. I take my little
yeah.
tongue scraper with me everywhere.
Everywhere. I know,
Yeah, I
totally.
got my husband into it and he does it now as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
and then oil pulling, there's a lot of different practices that are really helpful, but it's just setting your body up to start, a fresh start. It's also just a nice ritual. I think rituals are really important to ground us and to keep us, wellness and vitality, including mental, emotional wellness and vitality. We often just think of physical, but the mental, emotional, it's a lifestyle. It's just a way of building your life,
mhm.
to live the most sattvic way, to live the most harmonious, and you're basically tilling the soil. You think of your whole life as a garden. You build your lifestyle so that you're constantly weeding the garden, you're constantly planting positive seeds, you're constantly watering it. So you have the most fertile soil for things to flourish and sprout. And that's, all we can do. And there's always things that happen that are challenging, but we know we can do what we can.
Mm. And something I actually wanted to ask you, it's just come up. Something I think you talk about really, really well. And this might be interesting in particular for yoga teachers listening. And also, I think it's possibly a bit of a cultural thing as well, because we as Brits, we don't talk about certain things as freely as Americans do, like, what is it, like politics, religion, money. And a big shadow of the yoga teaching world is money and earning enough money. And I
Yeah.
think you do it, you talk about it in such a skillful way because, it's like there is, for example, no, like that people, I think people struggle to, what's the word, like assimilate the need to be abundant, to have a life that can sustain you and do this sort of spiritual, selfless work. Um, and I wondered if you could just kind of tell me a little bit, because I mean, yeah, I haven't really discussed so much with anyone yet who's been on this podcast, financial health. And
Mhm.
that's just, I've just thought about that now. So I hope you don't mind me
Yep.
asking. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like how would you, do you have any just like wisdom to share on that? Because I think it would just be so valuable, excuse me, for anyone, teachers, healers,
Yeah.
whatever, in
It's such an important conversation. It's something that has really been in the shadow, I think, of most cultures. The conversation about money and financial wellness and wealth, WELL, like being well in your financial world. And the financial wealth, abundance is connected to the first chakra. So if you're looking at the chakra system, the first chakra is our root system. It's our foundation. Everything else relies on that. You sort of can't go into the other realms unless you have a stable, it's very, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Unless your core basic needs are met, you're not going to be really putting a lot of attention into creativity or spiritual evolution if you can't even get, food, water, shelter, safety, security. And that is financial. The currency of that is our financial abundance. So we have to tend to our financial health. And I love that term. And I've actually been using that, financial health, more and more. And there is a real shadow in the spiritual yoga world. I saw a great quote from Sahara Rose the other day on Instagram that really grabbed my attention, where she was doing a little reel about financial abundance in the spiritual world. And she tied it back to spiritual cultures in the past. We have sort of this very idyllic, rose colored glasses of looking to the past, I think, in the yoga. Oh, it was like so perfect then, or that's how it should be. Anyway, one of the things that she was saying was, in spiritual traditions, whether, it's Judeo-Christianity or yoga, the spiritual leaders of maybe ancient times, certainly indigenous cultures, were taken care of by the village, right? So if you look at now, modern day, let's say the Catholic Church, right? The priests live in the, you know, live in their community. They're taken care of. They're paid by the church, or I don't even know if they get a salary, but everything is covered for them. And they're taken care of by the community. They don't have to think about going out and generating income. And, and that's common in all spiritual traditions, that our leaders would be taken care of, or even wisdom keepers would be taken care of by the village. Well, that doesn't exist now in the modern world in the same way.
Mhm.
And so I think we came up with this antiquated, outdated view that, like, if you're offering spiritual teachings, you shouldn't be charging for them, or you should be charging the absolute bare minimum. I look at it from the perspective of, first of all, I want to just, put this into context and say, we always want to offer things, tithing, things on a sliding scale, making things available to people. I'm not necessarily talking about the social injustice of the world, because that's all industries need to be making things accessible and addressing the systemic inherent injustice that lives in these systems. But for us as individuals and entrepreneurs, we need to live well. We need to take care of our family. This is an actual profession. And so this is how you're supporting yourself. This is how you're supporting your family. And you deserve to live well. There's actually a teaching in Tantra that says, mukti bhukti, like the worldly success and the spiritual success are inseparable, right? So you cultivating your spiritual success and fulfillment, let's just say fulfillment, is inseparable with your worldly fulfillment, right? Because we are human beings living in this three-dimensional world. And so we need to have things, and we also deserve to have fulfillment, not just the bare minimum, but live well.
Mm-hmm.
I look at it like, my sister, my father are both attorneys. My other sister and brother-in-law are in finance. We don't have a second thought that, lawyers, financial advisors are making hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars an hour, 400, 500, 700, $1,000 an hour. And for me, if you look at the value of what you're getting for that, I strongly believe that doing yoga and spiritual practice and mental emotional health is perhaps the greatest investment we can make in ourselves. It's going to bring us the most ROI. For us to sit down and do therapy or do practices and learn these tools that are going to create a massive shift in our lives and the quality of our lives, the quality of our minds and our emotional health, has a very impactful, you can shift the trajectory of someone's life. I think that is of, at very least, equal value to writing contracts, financial advising, all of those things. So I don't think it's any less important. In fact, I would maybe argue it might be more important. And these are fundamental life skills that we need, and we're never taught. We're not taught them in school. We're not taught them, most of us, by our parents. That might be changing now in these generations, but certainly for most of us, we didn't grow up learning about mental, emotional health, spiritual wellness, financial, physical vitality. And so it's not to say that, okay, we need to make equal dollar for dollar, but it is to say that you, as a spiritual wellness entrepreneur, deserve to make good money. You deserve to stand in your power. You probably will have to build skills to learn how to educate your audience on the value of what you're bringing, because in our society, it's not yet equated. But that's part of our job, is to show up as professionals, is to really present our value and charge that and stand behind that. So no more offering things for free. If some company asks you to come do their, yoga in the park for free, you say, no, I'm a professional. You would never ask a lawyer to come do something for free. You would never ask your plumber to come fix your bathroom for free. Most other professions, that is not even a possibility, unless they decide they're going to do pro bono work. So you do not have to accept free things just to get exposure. You can get exposure with yourself. You're a professional and deserve to be paid for your skills and your training. And then when you look back on how much time, how much money you've invested, hopefully, in your education, that's really important. Now, the one caveat I will say is, I do think that I heard another person recently on Instagram saying how this sort of entrepreneur culture now in the last, let's say, 10, 15 years has come up. And there is sort of this online, I don't want to say get rich quick or whatever, but there's kind of an entitlement. And I think it's really important that, if you're just starting out, it's not like you're going to be charging hundreds of dollars an hour, but you build into that. You really do your diligence. You put in your, 10,000 hours, and you slowly begin increasing your prices, and you stand behind that. And you also think, I think this is an important factor. And I think that it's quite a big conversation. I'll just a couple more points that I do want to make. But if you just look at inflation, let's say in the United States, I think inflation, let's call it 7%. I'm not exactly sure on the numbers, but if in the last 3 years, prices have gone up 7 to 10% at the grocery store, gas, etc., rent, your prices should also have increased to match inflation. So
Hmm.
if you're not at least raising your prices to match inflation, you're already losing money.
Yeah.
So this is where we have to be financially in with financial health and skillful and really paying attention. So the last piece I want to mention is many of us, and I've done a lot of contemplation on this because it's been a real source of struggle for me. And what I've noticed with my students and these industries in general, many of us are more oriented, and this is very Jungian, Myers-Briggs typology of your personality type. Many of us are more oriented to the right brain, creative, emotional, nonlinear. We may not be as adept in the literal not so much linguistic, but logical, financial sort of hard skills that our culture tends to overvalue. We may be more oriented and more skillful in these soft skills, human, relational, emotional, spiritual, creative endeavors. So what that means is many of us, including myself, the money thing doesn't come as naturally for me. I really have to apply myself. And it's the yin and the yang, and that's the yoga. And that's where I like to frame it as hatha, the feminine, masculine, not that it's genderized, but it means that we have to take it on. We have to take on these attributes that are less, uh, that we're less adept at, and we have to build those skills and we have to really apply ourselves. So if you know that's you, if you were like, yeah, I recognize that, I don't quite understand all the financial lingo. I think of it like my brother-in-law is a partner at Goldman Sachs, and he's, super into all these, I mean, formulas and concepts in the financial world that I can't even really wrap my head around.
Yeah.
But that's like me talking to him about the chakras. He's like, WTF, what are you talking about? The
Yeah,
chakras,
totally.
archetypes, like, you know, we're talking different languages. So if I'm going to become more skillful in the financial world, I need to learn that language. I need to put myself in those conversations. That's why it's very important that you choose your teachers, your coaches, your friends, the people that you're around very wisely, because you need to be putting yourself in conversations and surrounding yourself with people who are also prioritizing the same goals. So, and the last story that I want to say that I mentioned before, I saw this. I was at a crossroads when I was turned 30 years old, and I was on a trip in Mexico, and I had brought three of my girlfriends from LA, two of whom were yoga teachers, and another very spiritual friend, and then my two sisters and my cousin were there, and they're all very professional in New York, Chicago, DC. And we got down there, and for whatever reason, it became so clear to me that there was two different trajectories happening. That my friends that were down there at the time, who are amazing, they're deeply wise, soulful women, they were not in the same financial conversation. They were not really in any financial conversation as my sisters and my cousin. And, you're turning 30, you're kind of thinking about, okay, what am I really doing here with this life? And I got on that trip that I needed to change my friend group. If I was going to meet the financial goals I wanted to have and really be thriving and abundant, I needed to get around different people that were also prioritizing financial wealth and abundance and financially savvy. And so I say that because I've had to continually, and I still do, a lot of work, and I'm very mindful of who I spend my time with. And I really only put a lot of attention and energy into those friendships that with people that are headed in the same direction, that are able to have these conversations, that are really focused on being an entrepreneur and running their businesses wisely, because it is shaping your consciousness. It is shaping your worldview and your habits and your behaviors. And that includes your partner too. So you need to make sure that you're really in conversations that are matching not only where you are, but more importantly, where you want to be in 5 to 10 years. Yeah.
Totally, totally. Yeah, that's I mean, yeah, I've got like a nice core group of friends that I've had for a long time, and we've all kind of moved together, which has been really, really
Yeah,
lovely. And
that's
same with my
amazing.
husband, like we've kind of moved together and,
Mhm.
and we often talk about what, where the future will take us and stuff. And kind of we're always like planning and think like we're being present, of course, but
Yeah.
I think it's good to keep like wanting to sort of push yourself in a, obviously in a soulful way, not like, grr, 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 like
Yeah.
grindy.
Yeah. And and that really is back to that dance of the yin and the yang, because we do live in a culture that is based on white supremacy. And I say that because it's important to understand the water we're swimming in, which is overvaluing um, perfectionism, instant gratification, external achievement. We don't want to get swept up in the shadow of the hustle culture and this sort of very patriarchal model that we've been in. We want to bring with us that yogic lifestyle, non-greediness, all of those tools we want to infuse into our life, but it is that balance of yin and yang where no, we're not. And I've been guilty of that flip of it too, of being really in that hustle, go, 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 achievement oriented, goal oriented. And then you get the goal and you're like, oh, well, it doesn't really make me that much more fulfilled. So that's why you really have to do the deep work of what is your definition of success, your financial, and it's, of course, success is not just financial, it's the whole of your life, but your financial numbers are going to look different than other people. What is success to you? One
Mhm.
thing with me, I realized in the last couple of years, like I'd rather have a little bit less financial and be able to spend more time with my daughter. I don't think those are mutually exclusive, but I don't stay up until, very rarely do I stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning working anymore, because I want to be with my daughter in the morning and I want to be really awake and present with her. And so my work has shifted, but yeah, so it's important to understand, the shadow of both, because we do live in that culture that's overly oriented in that way, but you still can have great abundance and wealth in all levels. And it's very deep work for each person to decide what their dharma is and what their soul, what brings real soul satisfaction. That's a currency I come back to, because I really emphasize it's a soul's journey. So, what is your soul craving and calling for, and then how do you create that in your life?
And I guess that could even change as well with
Definitely
you
changes.
check in and it's different what you wanted.
Yeah.
What you want now is different than what you wanted before, and then it has to.
Yes.
But I guess that's like the beauty of yoga, is it teaches us to adapt and kind of fit around. Um,
Yeah, I think we just did a vision casting for the new year, a whole workshop, and that was really the point of it, is that our needs and our desires shift, and so often we just create our goals like by rote based on what we've been doing or our conditioning or what we're told we should aim for, 6, 7 figures, whatever it is, instead of really tuning in. Like, is it the year for you to move to a smaller town? Is it the year for you to just, maybe you're in deep healing right now, you lost someone you love, or you went through a big heartbreak, or there's different phases in our life, and it's really attuning to that. It's not this arbitrary go, go, go. Building and more is better and faster is best is a lie that we've been sold, and we know that that does not equal happiness.
as
So what, yeah. So really attuning to what does bring you happiness.
Because I actually, something I also like to ask everyone I have on is kind of if there's something, usually it's like a wellness practice that's being touted that you think is maybe more harmful, but maybe you've already answered that with kind of looking at like the shadow of, maybe it's not so much a wellness practice, but the shadow and the light of having a business in this world, in this wellness world, or if there's something else, I would love to know.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a toxic positivity, that's really rampant in the self-help spiritual world, of this sort of, aim that we're supposed to be the happiest person we know, or like we should be, striving for, even like, I've fallen really the camp of 80/20. So I'm like, 80% of the time I'm trying to really be on it and really mindful, but we're human, 20% of the time, like living, making mistakes, like it's okay. I think that I really try not to pathologize anything, meaning like make something wrong. It's like, you know, so I think this toxic positivity or this aim, it can also lead into this addictive compulsion of like, nothing's ever good enough. I always need to keep striving. I need to refine my diet even more. I need to hack this, I need to work on this piece of my psyche now. And yes, I think we are all evolutionary beings and should be seeking our own evolution. And it's okay, like just live life too. And being in, sort of that. That's why Ram Dass is one of my great teachers, who's just brings so much levity and humor and reality, humanity to the journey. So for me, I never forget Ram Dass. He just never shamed himself. There's like the toxic positivity, and then the shadow of that is kind of the shame, right? The shaming of like, oh, I'm not doing this right, or I should be doing more, is sort of arising from that. I would call it white supremacist kind of cultural norm or more. But anyway, Ram Dass has this story about how he went to go on this deep meditation journey and, rented this cabin in the woods and was there for like a month or, something in silence he was going to be. And he got to this cabin and there was a TV in the cabin and there was like a bottle of scotch in the cabin. And so he just ended up every day watching TV and having scotch. And he was like, okay. And instead of shaming himself, like, oh my God, I just totally fucked that up. Like, what am I doing? He was like, okay, this is my practice. This is curious. I'm sitting here watching TV and drinking scotch right now. And I'm okay. And the next day, and I'm still watching. That's interesting. I'm still wanting to watch TV and drink, so I'm sure he meditated in there, but that story I love, for example, for me, it's like when my father was dying and I moved home, luckily to be with him, I wasn't getting on the yoga mat every day. I wasn't sitting in meditation. I was staying really present. My aim was to be as present as I could. And my breath was really my tool, and walks in the neighborhood and nature. And then I was having a cocktail every night. I was like, we were all having a cocktail every night because we were just like, okay, this is surreal. Like, this is intense. And I don't think we need to beat ourselves up about that. It's like we, do the best we can and really do the best you can and give yourself some grace. I mean, I was aware. I was like, okay, when this month comes to an end, like you're not going to just be keeping having one or two cocktails every night. But for now, this is what you're doing and you're being present and you're really showing up. So I don't know, I just use that as an example because I think we need to have grace and let ourselves be human and be on the human journey.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice because so often people think that if they trip, like, especially now, like at the beginning of a new year when people have set maybe quite rigid resolutions and, you know, uh, the whole like kind of say dry January and maybe they have one drink and they're like, right, that's it, I've ruined it all. And that's not sustainable and no one, even if people say that they live, I mean, okay, maybe someone who's
There
lived.
are some, there are
Yeah,
some people,
there
yeah.
are some, but you know, a lot of people I would say have a little, a little, like you say, an 80/20.
Yeah.
Um, and it's great when people like you can be honest about that because I think it just lets people know that, it's okay. And to stay curious about what you're doing and to stay present.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's the key. I really think instead of like being the happiest person, it's actually one of my, taglines is now like live awake. Like try to be as present and awake when you're going through something, even if you're making a choice that's not the healthiest or the most, positive. Can you be curious about that? And so there's many
Mhm.
times in my life, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I'm aware that I'm doing this thing right now that's probably gonna, have a repercussion.
Mhm.
Let's watch that. Let's become more aware. I think the aim is not happiness or even we might say satisfaction. I think the aim is wakefulness, consciousness, presence. Because life is always going to be up and down. So how present, sort of the power of now, Eckhart
Mm.
Tolle in a nutshell, like how do we just stay present to what is, try to do the best we can and have compassion when we know we could do better. But really stay awake and present and that means not getting caught in judgment or shame, having that compassion, definitely working to continue evolving and being more skillful,
Mm-hmm.
but it's its own process. And that's where my orientation as a depth psychologist comes in, that the Jungian concept of the shadow is not something to be afraid of or push away. It's just something to invite in and like, okay, this is part of me too.
Mm-hmm.
Just having a conversation with my partner, and I was like, hey, we really just have to, as life partners, we are getting to know each other's shadow. We're actually saying yes to this person's shadow and these challenges they have and these triggers, and getting to know and hopefully be like brother sister to help each other out, instead of just getting hooked and then shaming and blaming. So
Mm.
I think wakefulness, consciousness, awareness is really the aim.
That's such a, I love that wakefulness. And Ashley, where can you tell us a little bit about like where people can find your teaching, your coaching? I know you have a ton of teacher trainings as well. Do you have them running at the moment?
Yeah, I have several, my big 300-hour training, 300-hour yoga teacher training, we will probably launch in the spring. Again, Yoga Psyche Soul. And that's a 5-month program. And then, but you can now go and sign up for foundations of yoga for mental health,
I did, and
or
highly recommend.
thank
I love that
you.
one. I go back to it often as well, actually. Just find it so.
Yeah, it's good. And that weaves in the shadow work and a lot of those pieces. Um, and then my trauma informed yoga training. And then I also have my membership, which is great. We're live streaming 3 times a week, Monday meditation, Wednesday yoga practice for an hour, and then Friday is a core work and a psychology takeaway tool. And then we have a full moon emotional processing. So I really look at my membership, it's called the Haven,
Mhm.
as mental, emotional, spiritual, physical health support. So we have, and we're going to weave in a professional layer, which will be that financial health as well. But it's really a community. It's meant to be a community. It's meant to have a lot of support, a lot of different resources. So we have the 3 live streaming a week. We have full moon, which is a group support call, and emotional processing call. So we're doing anger work and releasing emotional release work every month. And then the new moon, we have a restorative practice, and then the priestess rituals 8 times throughout the year, the wheel of the year rituals. So that's been amazing. We're getting ready to start our chakra immersion, which is coming up at the end of January. Yeah, I would say probably the easiest place is Instagram. I'm not on there every day, but all the links are there, and then you can just go to wherever you want, what you're most interested in, and definitely DM me. Send me a DM, screenshot of this, and we
Yeah.
want to get to know you for sure.
Well, I'll pop all these links in the episode description anyway, so everyone can find them. And yeah, thank you so much, Ashley, for coming on to chat with me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much, Elle, and everyone for listening. It's such a pleasure. I'm so grateful. So grateful.